Welcome to the Brightword Books Podcast. Brightword is a leading platform for diverse storytelling, where voices from all backgrounds can share their unique narratives and connect with readers from around the world. Follow our regular podcast updates, where we strive to foster a literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. We're Overdosed addresses the growing concern of addiction in modern society, especially the overuse and dependency on prescription medications. Barry delves into the history of the pharmaceutical industry, the rise of the opioid crisis, and its devastating impact on individuals, families, and communities. In short, We're Overdosed is a call to action to its readers, urging readers to reassess their relationship with drugs, challenge the pharmaceutical industry's influence, and take control of their health by exploring holistic, sustainable options. Barry, welcome to the program. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, at its heart, the book is about a societal crisis, the opioid epidemic, and the problems that Americans, it seems in particular, have with prescription medications. But it's also a very personal story. It goes to the social, psychological, physical impacts on individuals affected. Can you talk a little bit about your views on how you structured the book, both talking about a societal issue as well as a very individual issue?
Well, sure. And I'll introduce the book briefly by saying I'm a pharmacologist by training, and I started my career teaching medical school. So what else do pharmacologists write about but drugs? So, although I have a memoir coming out entitled Boomer Dad. I was interested in opium because I'm interested in the history of natural products. And natural products, tobacco, digitalis, some of the common drugs we know are from natural products. They're from plants. And perhaps we learned about them. We, Western European-derived people, learned about them because perhaps Native Americans used them. I don't know. There's no written record that goes back that far. So I wrote about it, and then I wanted to discuss the history thereof, but I realized there's very little market for the history of drugs. So I expanded it, and I like to say that the subject grabbed me and pulled me in, and that's how I ended up writing a book on it. At the time, my second marriage was blowing up, and I I was accused of hiding from the family. Well, okay, I accept that. What about the book? What else about the book? Well, if one wants to talk about opiate pharmacology, we have to think in terms of addiction. Well, what's addiction? So I try to describe addiction for my reader. I try to describe the concept of tolerance for my reader. And if we think about addiction, what's feeding addiction? Well, it's the availability of drugs. So how did drugs get to the New World? I discussed that. And then how do we stop it? People always say, how do we get control of opiates? And I said there's two ways to get control of opiates. One is governmental. We have to manage our prescriptions laws more efficiently. Well, how do we manage prescriptions more efficiently? It's important to remember that prescriptions in the United States are issued on a state-by-state basis. And the physician is licensed by the state in which he or she writes the prescription. So what can we do with prescriptions? Well, we can centralize them. And I said all drug drug issues in the United States should be managed by one person. And I proposed such person as a cabinet level person. Why cabinet level? Because law enforcement, the Drug Enforcement Administration, research, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and drug use are governed by cabinet level people. So the whole thing should be managed by one cabinet level person. And I said all opiate prescriptions, OxyContin, morphine, every fentanyl, and I've had fentanyl, by the way. I don't like this stuff. I lived in a fentanyl fog for a day. I
Wow.
can't stand that. I'm a sober guy, but should be managed by one person. And that way the government could manage the prescriptions, they could track the prescriptions, and they could control the prescriptions, all by one person being in charge. How did I come up with such an idea? I used to manage drug development using a team approach, and I worked for a German company. People say, how did you learn to talk to a camera without getting nervous? Did you ever talk to a German board of directors?
Good point. Good point.
They'll get your attention. That's how we should manage prescriptions in this country. Now, how should we get control of illicit drugs flowing into the country? Well, it's a fact of life right now that 70% of all deaths due to overdose are due to fentanyl. And the DEA has taught us that the fentanyl is coming in from China. Now, I've been asked, is that a act of war on the Chinese part? I say, if you're going to poison a population, you're committing an act of war. And I won't eat in a Chinese restaurant anymore because I'm sure they're coming for me. But all right, so they stopped importing fentanyl as a molecule. They started exporting what we call drug precursors, drugs that are the raw materials for making fentanyl. They export them to Mexico. Who takes them in Mexico? The Sinaloa cartel. What do they do with it? They make fentanyl and ship it into the United States. How does it get into the U.S.? Well, the latest is it's flown in on drones. There's no one to arrest.
Wow.
It doesn't come in on the backs of immigrants. So I won't get involved in the immigrant argument right now that's politicized. It comes in vehicles. What kind of vehicles? Well, semi-trailers. Now, so what? Why can't we track it? Why can't we turn a dog loose and sniff a semi-trailer? Because a semi-trailer is carrying 18 tons of Mexican blue corn, for example. How do you hide 2 pounds, 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds of fentanyl in 18 tons of grain? Put it at the bottom. The dog will never smell it. So I said, the way to get control of it. Oh, and Americans who work for the Sinaloa cartel cross the border. They load up the cars and they drive the fentanyl back across the border. It doesn't take much fentanyl to kill a lot of people. 2 pounds of fentanyl is, I discuss it in the book, is enough to kill the entire American population if everybody took it.
Wow.
It's scary. It's so potent.
Very.
And the derivatives of fentanyl, carfentanil and alfentanil, they were designed to take pain away from horses and cows. Well, if it takes pain away from a horse, what would it do to a human? It'll kill it.
Take your life.
Take the life away.
Wow.
So that's why people are dying from fentanyl.
So it
Now,
sounds not to interrupt you, but it sounds like whether it's the prescription crisis, people point at the drug companies or bad doctors and greed, or the illegal drug crisis with the cartels. It sounds like you're advocating that only government can manage both of those issues,
well,
or ultimately
who,
solve it.
who's big enough to go after them?
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
as it is, the border is politicized as a problem for the U.S. But as I said, it isn't the immigrants taking the fentanyl into the country. It's Americans who work for the Sinaloa cartel going across the border into Mexico, loading their cars up, and driving it back across the border. How do they get in? They're Americans. They flash a passport and say, hey, let me in. I'm going home to mama.
Wow. Wow.
So I said, well, how do we get control of 2 pounds of fentanyl in 18 tons of corn? I said, if I can open my garage door with my cell phone, maybe we should use technology. So I said, all right, let's find a technology company. I don't care if it's Apple or Google or Microsoft, it doesn't matter. And say to them, we want you to design a sniffer that will go into a trailer and sniff out the fentanyl that's in 18 tons of corn. If I can open my garage door, the technology is available to us, but we need the instrument to do it. Similarly, the industry was guilty. I think the industry has gotten the message. There was a small company in Connecticut that's taken some major hits, Purdue Pharma, for giving us OxyContin and advertising it on television and telling physicians it's not addictive. And they're paying out billions of dollars to for that little sin they committed. What about the rest of the industry? Well, the rest of the industry practices Me Too medicine or Me Too marketing. If Purdue Pharma is making $8 billion a year selling OxyContin, every company should have an opiate, and that's why the opiates have spread the way they have, because the industry has said, "Hey, all we're doing is selling a legal drug." But all
Wow.
people are doing is looking for ways to get it illegally or to trick the system into letting them have 2 prescriptions instead of 1.
Wow.
That's a long-winded answer to your question.
Oh, it's a very insightful one, though.
Thank
And
you.
it strikes me, Barry, it's such a huge issue. It's just so complicated. How did you go about researching for a book? I mean, it must have been a challenge.
Well, remember, I am a pharmacologist and I did work for the drug industry for many years. So I won't badmouth the industry. They took good care of me.
Yep.
I did finish my career by working as a director of drug development. And the drug I was developing was Dilaudid, oxymorphone. And I didn't know at the time that I was adding to the problem, but I was. I retired from the position and I started writing. And here I am talking about a book that curiously didn't sell well in the United States, and yet it's a bestseller in the UK. It
Interesting.
makes no sense. I'm headed to London next week or the week after, I don't know, and doing a book signing at the London Book Festival.
Wow. Wow. So who would be your target reader, Barry? Who are your messages for? Is it the politician, or is it the individual suffering from an addiction, or both?
It's a good question. I say my readership, my target readership, are college educated non scientists. To the extent that I've written with them in mind, that would take in politicians, users, because curiously, the users have become more educated with time. It started out as a problem in less advantaged areas, ghettos, and yet now it's spread into colleges.
All levels of society.
And the strange thing is, in 2022, 110,000 Americans succumbed to opiate overdose. In 2023, the rate of death went down ever so slightly. I don't know why. I don't think anyone can begin to say that it was better enforcement, better prescription management, fewer drugs on the market. I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen in 2024 when the statistics come out, and even this year. And let's see if it levels off, if it continues to go down, or it goes back up. It just had a little S curve in there. I don't know.
But a crisis, any way you look at it, at crisis numbers.
Well, we're killing 100,000 a year. It's a heck of a crisis.
Wow. You advocate in the book for alternative healing approaches. Can you talk a little bit about what do you mean by alternative healing?
Well, I'm not talking about acupuncture.
Okay.
I'm talking about other drugs that don't have addiction potential. And I read an article just last week that talked about the industry doing research on a drug that has a different mechanism. What is a mechanism of action of these drugs? They bind to our opiate receptors that we have in our brains. What's an opiate receptor? It turns out we have drugs in our brain, not drugs, neurotransmitters in our brain that bind to areas in our brain called receptors that are designed by our genetic makeup to recognize those neurotransmitters. Another subject. I don't want to get involved in discussing human physiology, but the industry is looking at a class of drugs now that attacks pain through a mechanism different than binding to the opiate receptor. And they're turning off the nerves that feed our brain pain signals. And it's a fascinating subject, and I wish the industry well. I'm no longer in it, and I don't own stock in the industry. I'm strictly tech. And,
Strictly a tech guy.
oh, please. I'm not here to talk about NVIDIA, but it's a great stock. And that's what I mean by alternative mechanisms.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating acupuncture or the laying of hands or any other cultish like approach to pain. Cancer patients can't do that. Cancer patients need to function through their disease. And the only way they can do that is by having their pain treated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it would seem, as if the concept that all pills are bad is not what you're saying. I mean, essentially, it was your career. Medicine, drugs are a wonderful thing. They've achieved great things for humans. And it's just the management of those pills and the management of those drugs that is the question and the challenge.
I view the drugs as sharp knives, and it depends how we handle them. I think, first of all, in the United States, we're one of only 2 countries that advertises drugs on television. The other is New Zealand. I don't think drugs should be advertised on television. And it's not because people are more likely to become addicted, or it has to do with who drives the prescription. If I go to my physician and say, I saw OxyContin available for treating the pain that I have, I need that drug. Who's making the decision to write a prescription? It's the patient who's driving the prescription. So I don't think drugs should be on television. I don't think people have enough knowledge to make wise decisions about what they say to their physician. And physicians struggle like everyone else to earn a living. They're not going to drive their patient away because the patient's asking for an opiate. They're going to try to counsel the patient. Well, patients can't be counseled. Patient saw it on TV, it must be right. So it's an issue. And not unique to the United States, but unique to the U.S. and New Zealand.
Absolutely. And it brings to mind the GLP ads, Ozempic and Wegovy, which started really as treatment for diabetics and have become a new billion-dollar weight loss miracle, so to speak. It could be a great thing. I mean, it could reduce heart disease. It could reduce cholesterol. The drug itself, it could be a good thing if people lose weight. But the approach, especially on some of the ads I've seen, it's almost like it's a game. What's your A1C? Take a shot and you'll get a 7.0 A1C. Would you say that's irresponsible, Barry? Or is it just money? It's all about money.
I think as long as we permit advertising on television, the industry puts away any morality and says, let's just market these drugs to the end. Make our $1 billion, pay our stocks. It bothers me that the industry takes a point of view about people as consumers rather than patients. It's a wrong way to view patients. But I'm not in the industry anymore. Now I write books.
And I think part of you, as much as you enjoyed your career in the industry, part of you perhaps is glad to be where you are at now.
Yeah, but how did I discover that I had writing talent so late in life?
Well, we're glad that you did. We're glad that
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, are there any resources or organizations that for people who may have an issue, either personally or in their family, and are looking for help and don't know where to turn, or perhaps are too embarrassed to admit they need help?
Well, the first stop in recovering from any opiate addiction is detox. Get the drug out of the system. How do you take the drug away from someone who's addicted to it? You have to block the withdrawal and block the desire of the person to keep taking the drug. That requires what's called rehab, rehabilitative medicine. And rehab generally doses the patients with another drug, yet another drug, but it blocks the withdrawal and it blocks the patient's desire to continue to take the drugs. And then there's aftercare. So the way to help someone, if you find someone or someone in your family is unconscious, get them Narcan, naloxone. Most police cars carry it now, and it's available over the counter. I fully plan to add it to my first aid kit, although I'm not a physician. And you might save someone's life. You find someone unconscious, squirt it in their nose, they'll wake up. Because how does opiate kill? It kills by preventing you from breathing. They're not easy drugs. I wrote in the book, they have hooks. Don't get caught.
Sound advice indeed. Barry, before we wrap up, are there any last messages that you'd like to share with our listeners today? I'm sure people will be wondering where they can get the book. I'm assuming Amazon is the place to go.
The book is available on Amazon. It's available as a Kindle edition. It's available as a hardcover and available as a soft cover. I just had it translated into German, and I just had it translated into Castilian Spanish. So it's available in 3 languages. And I did contract for an Audible edition, so you can listen to it in the car, although I haven't seen it for sale yet. So it is available. And you can always write me. You can contact me through my website, barryigold.com. And I'll answer questions or direct you to any resource. I won't recommend a specific resource, but I can recommend the resources. And how do you find a rehab? Google it, like everyone else.
Like everyone else. Terrific. Well, Barry, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
And me as well. My pleasure as well.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Barry Gold, author of We're Overdosed. Very intriguing subject, and obviously some insights from a very learned individual who spent years in the industry. And I think it would behoove us all to pick up the book and learn more about this critical issue. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you on the next episode. You've been listening to the Brightword Books Podcast, home of the literary community that celebrates creativity, inclusivity, and the transformative power of literature. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss future episodes. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.